Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, June 2014. On a hot summer night, the tension was palpable when Riyadh police received an emergency call. On the other end of the line, a young woman's trembling voice rang out, "My father-in-law, he's dead." It was Rana, 28, a Muslim wife of a wealthy family. The police quickly arrived at the luxurious villa in the city center where the crime took place. When they arrived, they were overwhelmed by the scene before them. Khaled, 65, lay motionless on the floor. His body was covered in blood, with multiple stab wounds to his chest and abdomen. Blood stains stretched across the floor, staining the shiny tiles. He had been dead before the police arrived, showing no signs of life. Khaled's son, Youssef, stood next to his father's body, his face numb, unable to express his emotions. He stared at the floor, his eyes empty, not a word coming out of his mouth. Not far away, Rana sat on the floor, tears streaming down her face. She cried out in panic, hugging her knees, her shoulders shaking nonstop. The suffocating air filled the room, creating a creepy feeling. Initially, the police thought it was a break-in that led to the murder, but there was no sign of forced entry from the outside. All the doors and windows were intact, with no signs of vandalism. The furniture in the house was intact, and nothing was stolen. This led the police to come up with many other hypotheses. The luxurious villa, once a symbol of the family's prosperity and success, was now silent and gloomy. Questions began to arise. Was this a case from the outside, or was there something deeper going on in this family? The police realized that the initial signs suggested that the case could be much more complicated than imagined. Khaled was once a wealthy and well-known businessman in Riyadh. He retired after years of accumulating wealth and now lives with his son Youssef and daughter-in-law Rana. Their family is known as an ideal family model in conservative Muslim society. Youssef, Khaled's only son, is a successful businessman, continuing his father's career, while Rana, his young wife, 28 years old, always appears as a virtuous and traditional daughter-in-law. However, what is hidden behind that perfect curtain is not beautiful. As soon as the investigation begins, the police realize that beneath the family's respectable appearance, there are many signs of tension and conflict. The relationship between Khaled and Rana is gradually exposed when small but suspicious details begin to appear. Rana is not happy in her marriage, and this leads to unexpected events. Rana and Youssef's marriage was arranged when she was very young, like many others in their community. Youssef, busy with work and often traveling, could not spend much time with his family. When Youssef was away, Rana had to stay in the large house with Khaled. This not only made Rana feel lonely, but also increased the distance between her and her husband. The family's neighbors also noticed the change. Rana became quiet, rarely communicating with people. Whenever Youssef was away, Khaled's presence beside her became more obvious. The two of them were often seen chatting in the yard, with conversations that lasted for hours. At first, this seemed natural in a Muslim family, where the father-in-law was responsible for taking care of his daughter-in-law when the son was away. But these conversations were not simply advice between elders and daughters-in-law. Not only did Khaled have long conversations, but he also showed excessive concern for Rana, which made many people wonder. Some neighbors even commented that the atmosphere between them seemed unusual when they saw the two in the yard or at home. Khaled often showed excessive closeness, sometimes with caring gestures that not every father-in-law would show his daughter-in-law. This further increased the curiosity and suspicion of those around him. The police, after collecting information from neighbors and relatives of the family, began to suspect the nature of the relationship between Khaled and Rana. The unusual signs of Khaled's concern for Rana gradually became the center of the investigation. The inappropriate intimate gestures, excessive concern, and prolonged conversations between the two made the police think of the possibility that Khaled and Rana had a secret relationship. Several neighbors recalled seeing Khaled and Rana in the less frequented areas of the mansion. Sometimes the two would disappear from view for several hours at a time. This further fueled the police's suspicions that the relationship between Khaled and Rana was more than just a family affair. The initial investigation was aimed at finding evidence of a break-in that led to Khaled's death, but when investigators discovered these details, the direction of the investigation changed completely. Indications were that Khaled's death could be directly related to the complicated relationship within the family. Further interviews with Rana and Yusuf made it clear that there were suspicious aspects to the relationship between Khaled and Rana that, if exposed, would shock the entire community. As the truth slowly comes out, the question arises, how long did this secret relationship last? And what really happened the night Khaled died? Was this simply a family tragedy or the result of betrayal and forbidden passion? The deeper the investigation goes, the darker secrets of Khaled's family become revealed. Through thorough investigation and interrogation, the police gradually revealed a horrifying secret. Khaled and Rana had maintained a forbidden relationship for many months. Khaled, a man of power and status in the family, had cleverly taken advantage of this situation to manipulate Rana. At first, his attention was simply the attentive care of a father-in-law when Yusuf was often away from home, but gradually his gestures and words exceeded acceptable limits. Rana, living in a marriage lacking love and care from her husband, was easily attracted to Khaled's attention. The arranged marriage from the beginning made her feel lonely and lost in her own home. The initial secret conversations between her and Khaled quickly developed into an intimate relationship that crossed the boundaries of morality and family. But what was worse, Khaled gradually turned Rana into a puppet in his hands, controlling her with power and psychological domination. Their relationship was not just a simple exchange of affection or passion, but became a dangerous control. Rana, initially fascinated by the care and attention, gradually became a victim of psychological manipulation. Khaled knew how to take advantage of her loneliness and lack of affection to keep her in a relationship with no way out. During the interrogations, the investigating officers found that Rana fell into a state of panic and showed signs of a severe psychological damage. She confessed that, although she knew this relationship was wrong, she could not find a way to escape from Khaled's control. This secret relationship was like an inescapable trap, pushing her into a spiral of torment, guilt, and fear. Every day, Rana faced Khaled's tight control, making it impossible for her to escape. Her guilt, compounded by the fear of the consequences of her secret being exposed, gradually made her psychologically unstable. These signs further led the police to suspect that the murder was not simply a violent attack, but also related to the deep mental and emotional trauma from the toxic relationship that Rana had endured for months. Yusuf, a successful businessman, is often busy with work and away from home on business trips. Although his relationship with his beautiful young wife, Rana, was not really passionate at first, because it was an arranged marriage, he still believed that she would keep the family together when he was away. However, in recent months, Yusuf gradually noticed a change in Rana. She became distant, cold, and quiet. Her indifference and avoidance in family life made him feel insecure. Their conversations became short, and their intimacy almost disappeared. Yusuf's suspicions began to grow when he noticed strange actions from his wife. Rana often had reasons to go out when he was not home, and when he tried to ask or find out, she often avoided or answered vaguely. At first, he tried to reassure himself, thinking that it was just stress in life or small problems that were not worth worrying about. But as time went on, the change in Rana's behavior became more and more obvious. Rumors from the neighbors that Khaled, Yusuf's father, was frequently visiting and chatting with Rana while he was away began to surface. This became too much for him to ignore. Feelings of jealousy and betrayal gradually took over his mind. He decided to start following his wife. At first, the meetings between Khaled and Rana seemed to be just exchanges between an elder and his daughter-in-law. But as he watched more closely, their conversations became more intimate and longer than usual. One night, Yusuf saw something he never imagined: Rana and Khaled together in a situation that only intimate people could have. With the pain and betrayal overwhelming him, Yusuf knew he had to face the truth. But instead of confronting him directly at that moment, he kept quietly planning to face his betrayers, hoping to find an explanation or at least some comfort for the pain he was suffering. One fateful evening, Yusuf decided to return home earlier than planned, determined to face the truth that he had long suspected. When he opened the door and entered, The house was strangely quiet. Only his footsteps echoed in the large house. Approaching the living room, he heard soft laughter, but that laughter did not belong to a happy family, but rather the closeness between two people that he could not accept. When he entered the room, he was stunned by the scene before his eyes. Rana and Khaled were sitting close to each other on the sofa, with intimate gestures that could not be mistaken. Anger flared up in Youssef, not only because of his wife's betrayal, but also because of his own father, the person he had always respected and trusted. Khaled, with a defiant face, only glanced at Youssef without any sign of shame or fear. This made Youssef's blood boil even more. He approached them, confronting them both, demanding an explanation. But instead of receiving an explanation, Khaled simply told him, "What happened happened, and you need to accept it." Those cold words seemed to add fuel to the fire that was burning inside Youssef. A fierce argument broke out between the two men. Rana, standing by, was completely panicked and didn't know what to do as she witnessed her husband and his lover confronting each other. The argument quickly escalated into a violent fight as Youssef could no longer contain his anger. He lunged at Khaled. The two struggled with each other, curses and threats pouring out. Resentment and a sense of betrayal completely took over Youssef's mind. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Youssef accidentally reached for the knife on the nearby table, the weapon that had once been just a decoration but now became a tool of revenge. He stabbed Khaled in a rage, the stabs never stopping. Each stab was like a blow to the betrayal and pain he had endured all this time. Rana, who was collapsed beside him, was completely stunned by what had just happened. She could only stand there, speechless, watching the blood spill all over the floor, witnessing the scene of her husband and lover facing off in a life-or-death battle. Khaled, the man who once held power and control over everything, now lay motionless on the floor, blood all over his body. He had died on the spot. The air in the house became eerily silent. Youssef stood there, holding the bloody knife in his hand, gasping for breath from the anger that had just exploded. He looked down at his father's body, realizing what he had done. But instead of feeling remorse, he felt only emptiness. What had been his life was now completely shattered. In that moment, both Rana and Youssef knew that things had gone too far, and there was no turning back. This bloody murder not only killed Khaled, but also destroyed the entire family, leaving everyone involved facing irreparable ruin. Immediately after receiving the call, the police quickly arrived at the scene and arrested Youssef. When they entered the house, they witnessed a haunting scene, Khaled lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by blood stains, and Rana sitting in a daze in a state of panic. Youssef, standing silently next to his father's body, did not resist when he was handcuffed and taken away. An investigation was immediately launched with the aim of clarifying the cause and context leading to this murder. During the investigation, it did not take long for the police to discover the forbidden relationship between Khaled and Rana. Testimonies from neighbors, information in phone messages, and call records between them clearly revealed the nature of this relationship. Rana, despite her efforts to hide it, could not deny that the truth had been exposed. This secret relationship was the main cause of the family's collapse and the violent confrontation that ended in murder. At trial, Youssef was charged with murder. His defense attorney argued that due to the betrayal of Rana and Khaled, Youssef lost control and acted in a fit of uncontrollable rage. Evidence of an illicit relationship between his wife and his father was presented in court, mitigating Youssef's charges. However, the court still had to act according to the law and could not ignore the murder charge. Despite sympathizing with the defendant's unstable mental state, the judge still made the decision. Youssef was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with mitigating circumstances. Although not directly charged with the murder, Rana suffered severe consequences from her illicit relationship with her father-in-law. She became the object of condemnation from society and the Muslim community. The once respected woman was now seen as someone who had broken up the family and disgraced religious traditions. Rana lived in isolation, ostracized and shunned by the community, facing torment of conscience, honor and contempt from those around her. She not only lost her family, but also lost respect and standing in society. The bloody murder of Youssef, Khaled, and Rana was not only a tragedy for a family, but also shocked the entire Saudi Arabian society. In a conservative country that strictly adheres to religious values like Saudi Arabia, this incident became the focus of public opinion, raising many questions about the nature of taboo relationships within the family. What happened was not only a betrayal between husband and wife, but also a violation of traditional cultural and moral values. The case serves as a wake-up call, reminding of the destructive power of betrayal and the dangers of abusing power in an unhealthy relationship. Conservative Muslim societies always value family honor and strict adherence to moral rules, but this case has exposed a dark side that even in seemingly perfect families, terrible secrets can be hidden. Many have faced questions about the balance between tradition, family power, and personal relationships, especially when those values are broken. This case has exposed the dangers of loneliness, emotional deprivation, and power abuse in the family. Rana, a lonely wife in a loveless marriage, was drawn into an illicit relationship with Khaled, her powerful father-in-law. The case is thus a warning about the power of control and how unhealthy relationships can lead to disaster. It is also a reminder of the need to uphold cultural and religious norms within the family, especially in the context of a traditional Muslim family. When these norms are broken, not only the individual, but the whole family and community face serious consequences. Youssef, who once led a peaceful life, was plunged into tragedy by the betrayal of his loved ones, and this case will forever be a painful lesson for many other families.